I have some fairly distinct memories of going 100 miles or 160 kilometers for my viewers outside of the US and the UK. Going 100 miles or 160 km down the road in order to get to the hospital, not because there was anything urgent going on, but rather because I was a very sick child who needed a lot of surgeries and checkups with specialists that I could not see where I lived or anywhere near where I lived. We had to go to Nashville, which was the capital city of my home state. And in order to get there, my dad would have to drive very fast in this old ruckety Jeep that did not drive very well, because the time in which we were supposed to leave was treated more as a suggestion rather than a hard rule. And my parents would spend a lot of the time arguing, a lot of the time looking for things because they wouldn't keep everything in the same place for some reason. And I found all of this very frustrating. In fact, I learned pretty early on that if I knew when something was supposed to be, I would always tell them that the time that we have to be at that place was 15 minutes earlier than it actually should be, which would sometimes annoy my dad because sometimes he actually would get there on time, but then we were there 15 minutes early. The thing is, I like to be 15 minutes early for everything, at least 5. But 5 feels like I'm not really living up to my standards. I'm constantly checking my watch. I'm constantly organizing things. The norm for me is 10, getting there 10 minutes early, in order to account for if anything goes wrong, for example. I do not like the feeling of anxiety and insecurity that is brought about by a lack of organization, by impunctuality. This is something that I find very distasteful, and I found it distasteful for as long as I can remember. I don't know if it was the trauma of growing up in that situation, witnessing those arguments and all of the disgruntled expressions between the two of them. They were very clearly stressed about the situation, and you can't help but think, okay, if you're so stressed out about this, why don't you just do something different? It never made any sense to me. When I've been in charge of things that I was supposed to do, I can't recall a time I was late, ever. I don't want to be late. I don't like to be late. It seems enormously disrespectful if you happen to be late for things that involve other people, friends, family, the like, and it seems enormously irresponsible if you are late for something that you need to do for yourself. This appears just self-evident to me, but the thing is, it's not just self-evident, possibly because of my experience, possibly because of something about how my brain works, I don't know. It's also very linked to this type of thinking that I have, where I'm constantly thinking about every individual element of everything. Like, for example, when I'm eating food, I'm always checking the back to see what the nutritional content is or to see what's in it, and if it doesn't have that, I'm looking it up online. No joke, I literally do this every time I eat, unless I've looked at it so many times that I know exactly what's in it from having looked at it so many times. And then I'm thinking about this in reference to prior knowledge that I have about nutrition and what I've eaten that day, and what is the synergy of this, and how is this going to make me feel. Literally nonstop, I just constantly think about this stuff. I don't know how to think about other stuff, And so whether it's with food, whether it's with how I'm brushing my teeth, or how I'm cleaning, or how I organize something, or how I'm sleeping at night, or how I'm doing this, that, and the third thing, really. I mean, I talk about my projects a lot on this channel with language and the like. I have a similar approach to that, trying to always be on schedule with my work, but also doing a lot of research. At least this is what I did at the start before I started actually learning, doing a lot of research on what the most effective methods are. What does the research say, like empirically speaking, about these methods? And focusing intently on trying to do everything in the most efficient way as possible. I have like a psychological attachment to this. And I'm constantly in this mode of go, go, go. You know, I can't stop. My brain is always thinking. And I don't understand people who aren't like that. The people who are just like, I don't know, it's like something about them is just idle. Nothing wrong with being like that, obviously. But I mean it in a deeper way. Like, I don't mean that they're just, doing hedonistic things that they really like. I mean, like, something about their thinking is idle, like on another level. I fundamentally can't understand those people. I don't understand people who, like, simultaneously are unorganized, don't really like thinking all that much. They don't like being challenged. They don't like being active. They don't like doing things. And also, they're late for everything. This is a type of person, right? It's a type of person you encounter. And, like, every time I encounter people like that, I'm just like, how do you even live, right? Like, if I were like that, I would literally just kill myself. I can understand having one or two traits, like maybe you're impunctual, right? But then, you have something cool that you're into or that you're working on. And again, I'm not saying like this is like a requirement people need to have to be like a good person or something. I'm not on some fascist shit. I'm not on some wagey shit. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, there are people out there that it really seems like they're just chronically apathetic. They don't care about literally anything, except in the moment when they absolutely have to do it right then, and by then they're already late, and then they're rushing to go as fast as possible, and they put people in danger in the process, rushing just because of what? Just because you were lazy that day and didn't structure your day well enough? It doesn't make any sense to me. And that's the other thing, too, the danger to other people. These are the kind of things I think about very often. I don't understand how people can drive so quickly in a residential area. This is a thing I see constantly, and it's frustrating. I do not understand how people can do that. You're in a residential area where there could be people, elderly people, the blind, children especially, playing, and the speed limit is set that way for the safety of the people there, and you're just gonna not follow it? Okay, well, what if all of a sudden a child with a bike or a ball, or an adult with a bike appears? Now you have to stop, but oh wait, because you're going at a high speed, you can't stop quickly enough, and boom, somebody gets hit. It happens. And this is a risk that people are just willing to take for some reason. Every time, without fail, that I go out and see this, I can't help but think about it. And I'm just noticing this kind of stuff constantly. The messes that people leave behind. I don't know how people do it. I don't understand how people can be so messy and then not clean it up. I can understand leaving a couple things out and, getting it the next day. Okay, that makes sense. But there are people that literally just, like, wreck their kitchen and then they leave it that way. How? Literally how? It doesn't make any sense. And I don't know what you call this, like the lack of conscience or just the inconsiderate nature of so many people is absolutely wild to me. I do not understand how they can function like that, because really it's not functioning. You're not functioning as a person in society if you're behaving in this way with total disregard for the people around you. And it's part of why I prefer to do things my own way, in my own world, without necessarily involving other people, without necessarily participating in society, because society is full of these people. It is full of these people that have absolutely no idea what they're doing, that don't care about the feelings of the people around them, that don't care about the safety of the people around them, and not even their own, that do not care about really anything. And it's just, I don't understand how you can operate like that. I don't understand it down to the simple everyday things, and I certainly don't understand it up to the bigger things, such as things that actually endanger people. It's like, have some consideration for those around you. But that is not as common of a thing as it used to be, or so I've heard. Maybe it's always been like this. But I don't know. I find it very frustrating. I find the apathy of people very frustrating, their disorganized nature. I find the lack of thoughtfulness and just like the inability to function. There's just something about them. It's just like these low vibration, low energy type people. It like I don't know. I really don't know. But something with regard to this has to change. I am glad that I saw how bad it could be, because I do not act like that, and I ended up kind of radically going in the other direction. But my only hope is that in the future, maybe it's stricter enforcement of laws we'll get, or just a more disciplined culture around a lot of these things. Either way, I would like to see something different. But this is kind of the weird contradiction I find myself in, because like simultaneously, I would like to be, actually I don't know. I was about to say I would like to be more tolerated or understood in society as like a NEET or whatever, but the kind of society that would tolerate that is also not necessarily the kind of society that would be, so disciplined in all these different areas. But I thought about it again, and I thought, well, maybe that's not true, because there's Japan. In Japan, the Hikikomori and NEET phenomenon is bigger, arguably, than anywhere in the world, and that's a very disciplined culture, in a way where I think it would be good for us to emulate. But then at the same time, the reason why there are so many arguably could be because they're not accepted, because there's this shame associated with that lifestyle and being that way. It actually encourages the phenomenon where more people become like that. So you sort of have to be careful what you wish for. I think the conclusion I always end up coming to is like, no matter what kind of society we live in, large scale like organization of humans just always ends up being bad. It just always ends up being bad. You're not going to be able to simultaneously, have this kind of disciplined, organized, peaceful society that is at the same time tolerant of its most vulnerable and bizarre members. Perhaps it is possible. It seems a bit utopian to me. I don't know. But I would be less accepted by society in exchange for one where people just got their act together, you know, where people are safe, people aren't acting crazy, you can just chill, you know. I don't really care about being judged by some wagey. I think it's a fair trade-off. And so in that sense, you know, as flawed in different ways as their society may be, I find myself really agreeing with a lot of the ways things are done in Japan. And then when looking at, you know, some more individualistic societies, you know, I find myself agreeing a lot with the way people are doing things in Norway, you know. I would love to be one of those in the woods guys who just never talks to anybody, and they got their cabin, they're chopping wood. If I could have access to my electronic tools, that would be awesome. And I'd be chill. But, you know, I live in the strange world, not the regular world. I received an interesting comment a while back. This was several months ago now, from somebody who posited a theory about the US in particular. I think he maybe even broadened it out to like North America in general. But he said that for people who just want to chill, it's not the best place to be because the culture was essentially founded out of the dreams and aspirations of people who didn't fit in the old world and who wanted to create something bigger. And so what basically emerged out of that was this predominant culture of being really loud and obnoxious and ambitious and not caring so much about what the rest think of you. And so people who just want to chill don't end up fitting in very well in the United States. I found it an interesting theory. I'm not sure how convinced I am. I think the prevalence of selfish behaviors and, you know, what some might call like a low trust society have more to do with other things, but it's an interesting theory, right? I don't know. At the end of the day, I don't feel very at home among other Americans, nor do I identify very much with my own country. There were a couple times when I tried to out of cope because I thought I would never be able to learn a language and then eventually leave, but I actually do think that's possible now, not just because I was able to achieve the first part, but because I have more faith in my ability to actualize the second part. And so from the perspective of like tangible results, I definitely think that I'm in a better position than I used to be. And so that desire to cope and to, you know, cling on to the American flag, like a victim of some sort of Stockholm syndrome, is nowhere near as present as it was for me a couple years ago when I was at my most, you know, nihilistic and unstable phase in life. I'm talking about 2022. That was such a crazy time with the Wyoming arc and everything. I was coping so hard with the normie shit, man. I was trying so hard to fit myself into that world, and it was bizarre, you know. I think everybody who was watching those videos felt that it was unnatural. They just felt that something was off, and I didn't really articulate why it was off until later, but I think many people who were watching figured it out on their own. And it was because I didn't like, you know, Americans. Obviously, you know, individuals are okay. I generally detest making these sort of broad generalizations, but like I'm talking about, you know, American normies, by and large, like the people who are going to their job and everything, the kind of people you meet there, and the kind of interactions you have. And I have different critiques of normies in other countries, Um, as much as I like punctuality, I can't stand the way that German normies will correct every single behavior you have. For example, just random strangers in public, they just correct you. And I could give examples from the other countries I have been to too. Normies are bad everywhere, and sometimes for different reasons. But, you know, I was trying to cope and to be able to fit myself in that society and to be mentally stable and function, and I just failed miserably. And I tried again several times, and it just didn't go that way for me. I've since developed other plans to eventually integrate into society in my own way, while still allowing myself that leeway to cling as much as possible to the place where I'm truly comfortable, which is in isolation. I want to give myself the freedom to ultimately spend time in my room as much as possible doing the things that I really enjoy doing. And it's strange because, like, I fell into this whole rant about normies in the world and normies on the globe because I was trying to single out the normies from my own country, to pick apart these individual things about them that I've noticed across various individuals, cultural norms, let's say. And part of the problem with doing this is it's sort of an endless battle. Like, you can pick apart these broadly applicable things that differ, across cultures, but always end up being bad. It's the same way where, like, I talked about earlier in the video, like, what would the ideal system be for public conduct, for example, because I had a bunch of annoyances. I had a bunch of things that bother me to mention, but also, as you start to break that down, you begin to realize, well, the kind of society that does the things I'm complaining about less frequently also comes with its own problems that are quite obvious and insidious as well. And so what do you do there at that point, right? It's all worth breaking down and critiquing. But in here, I don't really need to deal with any of that. It goes back to what that guy was talking about American culture. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But the simple fact is that I don't have to interface with any of that. I don't have to be affected by any of that as long as I'm in here. And so for as long as I'm in here, I can engage with whatever content, whatever culture, whatever individual that I might have the desire to engage in or with. And that is tremendously liberating, I think there are people who might say that to choose to be surrounded by four walls is something akin to solitary confinement, right? That it's this prison. And I find it a curious position because it doesn't feel involuntary. It doesn't feel like something that is being forced upon me as a punishment, but rather a refuge that I run to, that I seek to pull together as many resources as possible to to be in, to absorb the comfort therein, which is very different than being obligated to be in a space that is designed to make you uncomfortable. Everything about this room was designed to make me comfortable. I've strategically placed everything exactly in the way I wanted it to be, because this is the place where I will inevitably spend the majority of my time, if not the entirety of it. And ultimately, that's the life that I want to live, because here I am free to make the decisions I would like to make, the only decisions that appear intuitive to me, that spring to mind, and I can't do that out there, where I am otherwise obligated to participate in their society, to play their game by their rules, the rules that I was never told about. I seem to have missed the meeting where people were told how to operate in society. I don't know how to do it. I find it frustrating, lonely, and above all, it feels like a waste of time.